I was standing in my office one day, internally complaining about stuff that wasn't happening within the business. Clients aren't getting this, and work isn't doing that, and profit's not looking like this, and cash not looking like that. You can't blame someone who's no longer in this room. So who's left in the room? It's like, oh shit, that's me. So I turn the finger around, pointing at your chest, and say, Andrew, what are you going to do about this? What are you doing in this space? And for me, it was like, well, who am I doing it for? Like, who is Illuminate? How can I know what I'm trying to achieve if I don't even know who I am? Or when I say for who I am, who we are as a business. It was at that very moment that I remember going, oh, I need to figure out who we are and what we stand for.
Welcome to the Seven Figure Accountant podcast. I'm super excited to have with me today someone that I've known for quite a long time now, and I think one of the big legends in the Australian accounting market anyway. Andrew, super excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, mate. It's a pleasure to be here. What an intro. I like that. That's cool. I should put that on a business card or something. That'd be rad.
It would be. So, Andrew, we're going to be talking about your story of becoming an accountant and the story behind Illuminate, which is what I call one of the most modern brands back in the day and still is now. I think it stands for something really cool and stands out in a crowded market, you could say, at times. So what got you into accounting? What got Andrew to become an accountant to start with?
Look, great question. I think I probably had more of the stereotypical kind of entry into the world of accounting. I was good at maths. I did economics. I did accounting. Turned out I was really, really good at it. And I am somewhat of a lazy person. So I'm like, if I'm good at it, I might as well just keep doing that. And so just logically, I just said, I guess that's what I'll do for my life. It's funny because I can think about when I was, 17, 18, that kind of age, and thinking about what I'm going to do, and then maybe starting the education and kind of some employment areas of it all. I always just thought I'd get a job as an accountant and then work at the same place forever, because I didn't understand what a career meant. It was just, that's your job and that's what you do. And so, I got a cadetship with a Big Four accounting firm straight out of high school, which is an exceptionally fortunate environment to be in, where you are exposed to your career before you're even actually in it whilst you're studying. And that kind of really kick-started, what does it look like to be an accountant for me? And now we're 21, 22 years on from that day now.
That's exciting. So what made you got into it, you're working in a firm. What actually made you make the decision to go and set up your own firm, your own business?
Oh, wow. Okay. So fast forward a good odd, 6 or 7 years after that, that point in time. And I got made redundant at where I was at the Big Four accounting firm. I then worked for a small suburban firm, kind of where I grew up, actually where I did work experience. There's a super kind of crazy story I can share if I've got time, but I won't right now. But and then I remember just where I was working at the firm. I was punching at work. I was doing a thing. They'd give me a bit of an office, which I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Didn't even ask for that. Rad, here we go. But then I started getting a little bit, I guess, disenfranchised with accounting and what it is that we do and why we do it and how we do it. And I started questioning, is it even worth it? It's just a transaction. I'm just putting a number in a box and I'm keeping someone out of jail. Now, I know I'm not the first person to have this epiphany, and I'm probably not the last person, or at least I bloody hope not. And I went, well, there's more than just the transaction, right? Behind every number in every box is a business owner. They've got family, they've got friends, they've got community behind them. And if I can build strong relationships with these people, then I can help them to maybe build businesses that have impact and give joy and give back to our communities. And so I looked around me where I was currently at that point in time, and I went, do I feel like I can do that here? And the answer was respectfully, but very clearly, no. I sought out some mentoring, got in touch with a bloke by the name of Jason. And a month later, I quit my job and started an accounting firm. I had no client base. I had no savings. I had no real experience managing that. I just had a desire to be more connected with people and to build a more relational experience. And Jason, the bloke who I'd met literally a month ago, had very similar value sets and very similar things as well. And so we just kind of clicked and worked really well together.
And how old were you at that time?
I was 26 years old. So I was very young in the world of accounting. I I can remember it would only been like a year or two after maybe getting CA kind of completion. I remember filling out my resignation, like writing a letter, and I put it in like the managing director's in tray. And then like going to my office, and I booked in like a 10:30 a.m. kind of meeting. I'll sit down and have a chat. And obviously he's looked in his in tray, seen that, and he calls me, and I say calls me, like I'm sitting in my office. He's like 20 meters over there. Hey, Andrew, do you want to come into my office for a chat quick about that letter? I was like, sure. Weird. You could have just walked over and have a chat. And so, yeah, we went there and so talk to me, what's going on? I said, oh, look, I've decided I'm going to step out. I'm going to do my own thing. And I could just tell the look on his face, and he was like, really? You're 26. You got none of that background and none of that environment that, people would stereotypically expect someone to have when you're stepping into running an accounting firm. And I can remember just thinking in that moment of like, I'm going to show you one day that like you're underestimating you're underestimating and you're overestimating. You're underestimating what I'm capable of, and you're overestimating the importance of what it is and the way you go about doing that. And you're stereotyping, you've blocked people into that environment. And so, yeah, 26, quit my job. My wife was a beauty therapist, so we weren't exactly making a stupid amount of money. I had 2 clients, of which one of them left me 6 months later. Not from my doing, they just had some challenges. And that one other client that I did have at that time is still a client of ours today in Illuminate, which is first ever client I had, and that's still one of ours.
So what was the mindset though? 26, married, to be able to take that leap takes guts to be able to actually do it. Did you have a real clear plan of where you wanted to take the business in the future, or was it you just wanted to go and do your own thing?
Honestly, at that point in time, I hadn't really discovered or understood business to the extent of actually playing it out. I just looked at, I can be more relational. I looked at, I can have more flexibility. And I looked at, I can make a heck of a lot more money, because I just went, if my hourly rate's this and I work this many hours, I'm going to be bloody rich. Now, the reality of it was that's not at all easy in truth, but there was hilariously, like I do a podcast with Ali Garrett from All In Advisory, and she's an exceptionally structured plan person. I was just like, it feels right. Let's do it. Let's see what happens. Let's see where it goes. And it wasn't until probably 4 or 5 years later, where I actually stopped and went, hold on, what are we building here? Who are we? What are we about? And that was the catalyst for then where we are now, the brand, the growth, the experience, the service level, the commitment to what it is that we're trying to achieve. But those first 4 years was, it was beautiful. It was amazing. We literally just put a blue 0 sticker on our door when we've got a physical office eventually. And it was back in the glory days where we'd literally get people just walk up the door thinking that we were 0, and then realizing we weren't, and then going, oh, well, do you know 0? And we would just win clients hand and fist over because other accountants were not in that space just yet. And that was probably our first exposure, or my first exposure to like having strategy in place to be able to grow, but unintentionally doing it.
So what did the first 4 years look like from a revenue point of view? Like, was it a significant increase, or did you just slowly grow up, or what sort of happened over the first 4 years?
We were definitely growing. So because I had no client base of my own, Jason, my business partner at the time, he had a client base, but his predominant work was more CFO advisory-esque kind of stuff. He's a bit of a unique beast where he'd kind of jump in, do some like financial consulting stuff, help to get in the CFO, and then almost sit on their advisory board and almost like help, like kind of quasi family office stuff as well. And so he had a small tax portfolio as a result of that. Some of the clients that he was sitting on boards or had worked with, or some other people through his life. So we had that very, very small kind of environment. But as soon as people knew that he had capacity, all of a sudden work just started showing up the very next day. And it was interesting, this mentality that they must have had beforehand going, Jace is a busy guy. He's got too much on. Let's not bother him to, hey, like Jace has now got this guy, Andrew, and it looks like they're going to go and do something together. And as a result, away we go. And so what Jason did in the early days, because I had no savings, because I had no clients, and because theoretically the day before we started business together, that was him. So it's not like he's going to go, oh, sweet, like we don't have like the fat to be able to do that. He paid me, or he effectively funded me to be able to pay my mortgage. at amount. I think it's like, here's $1,000 a week, I'll pay you that. And then the goal is we'll get to like a break even point, and at that, then I'll slowly start getting repaid from what I've given you, and then collectively we grow that together. I think within 6 weeks, all the new work that we'd won had then made that contribution from him negligent, not required. And then we kind of grew quickly over probably the first 3 or 4 years. So I think like our first full year of business, we turned over about 190. And then the next year we turned over 630. And that jump was a combination of Jason simply being available and us being able to, and people wanting work. And I guess myself as an individual starting to learn and understand my network and the people I can support and what I can do. And then slowly understanding how to become visible and connected within areas where you might want to work with people.
So that's quite a big jump. I mean, what did like the team look like at that size? Was it just the two of you, or did you start recruiting team members then? Like what? Because I call it the messy middle, when you really there in that 500,000 to $1 million. It's quite messy because you're big enough, but you're not big enough. How did that look from, like, how did you get the work done?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think in that first year we hired someone. But I had a young kid who was at high school, and he kind of, because we didn't have an office, he'd like come to my house and would work from there. And he kind of helped to support me with a few bits and pieces, which was kind of good. And then we picked up a client that needed some bookkeeping work, and they wanted to do it in-house. So then we went to market to try and hire someone simply to place in the client. And it turns out that person, Christy, who's still part of our team now, she was a self-managed self-managed accountant, so specialist in that area. So we went, oh, that's kind of cool. Well, we've got some self-managed super funds and we'd like to do more. So we started getting her to do that. And then we brought on an administrative team member. So it was probably at least a year and a half before we had someone on board. And then strategically, even from that date to now, hiring people for me is like, we know that we have a need or a skill set that we require, but what we're really looking for is the type of person and or what else they could offer to this business as a result of that. And so Christy was a great example of, yeah, she can do some bookkeeping, but also now she can look after our self-managed super funds, which will continue to pump up. And so I'm literally looking at my numbers on a screen here to kind of give you some reference here. I'm going, yeah, no, we didn't pay anyone there. We didn't really hire properly for probably a good 2 to 3 years before we then brought in like accounting resources. It was it was year 3 when we started bringing in like accounting resources externally as employees, because we were able to look after that ourselves at that point in time, and we wanted to be smart with who we were bringing on board. Do you just bring on a bunch of young kids and throw them work and see what happens? Do you bring someone who's more senior, more experienced, so they can free you up? And it's more about what I wanted to spend my time with there. Like, did I want to be able to do more work and be more efficient, thus bring administrative support resources on? Or did I want to be able to win more work and have more time to be able to do business development stuff? Thus, I'll bring on some more revenue generating kind of people. And it wasn't for 2.5 years, almost 3 years before we started bringing on the revenue generating with proper growth team intention.
So you mentioned about the year 4 was when everything really changed. So year 3 and 4, what was the revenue that you got up to there and the team size roughly before that, the 4th year?
It's interesting because in the 4th year is when I bought out my business partner.
Okay.
So I think so year 3, so we went from 200 to 620 to 740, 750-ish. And then I bought my business partner out. And when we did that, effectively, he took the clients that he was looking after. There was a lot more of that advisory, CFO-y stuff. And it was a fair chunk of client base that was there. I think it was a good 200 to 300K worth of work that he was probably looking after. I can remember like going through the process of buying him out. We had a day planned, and I had like 2 different consultants, one for the morning, one for the afternoon, just to help us to talk about it all. Because what we found is we've gotten to the point where Jason is exceptionally talented and almost in like a project kind of accountant kind of vibe. He'd find himself in opportunities and projects and investing his time there. And what we didn't talk about when we started the business was like in agreement of what our roles look like going forward, ongoing. We'd made assumptions. Jason's assumption was Andrew will run effectively the compliance business, so we can look after that. and Jason will effectively go do his thing and farm clients into this business, but not have to be as involved enough. But as we grew in scale, it just wasn't possible because a lot of these clients that we were servicing were also connections of his. And so as a result, we got to this point where we had a couple large projects and we went, you know what? Either you're going to try and reduce your hours, but still probably get peppered by the clients and the team the same amount, or maybe we look to exit you. And so in the morning, I had a good conversation with a consultant. In the afternoon, we had it. And the guy in the afternoon was very direct. He's like, cool, this is what you want to do, right? You want to do this? Cool. What's your number? What's your time frame? Done. And I reckon within 45 minutes to an hour, we just agreed for me to buy him out. And so I went camping, drunk half a bottle of wine, and kind of went, what the hell have I actually just done here? And that was a shift, because then that year was when we theoretically went backwards. We went down to about 690K revenue that year. But that was because I had bought the business partner out, exited a whole bunch of his clients there. He still floated around the background, and we did a strategic way to allow me to afford that. And then we continue to grow from there.
And what was so was it then that you really set the vision of what you wanted the business to be moving forward? Because you mentioned that's when it became Illuminate, which is a very modern brand for, 2016. There wasn't many firms branded like that. It's all, John Smith and Sons, or, John and John's, or whatever it is.
We were Illuminate from day one.
Okay.
Because that was like, both Jason and I were like, we do not want to have our name in this business. Whilst, yes, we are the individuals running it, if our names are there, people are always going to think about us. They're always going to refer to us. They're always going to expect to work with us. And you're building a business, but we're not building one that actually releases and frees you up. You're building one that somewhat traps and contains you within it because it's your name. And also, like, what happens if all of a sudden we build out, another person who might come to a leadership position with us? Does that mean we have to change the name? And so Illuminate was something that we had from day one. It was an accidental name that Jason came up with, support of someone randomly. And we loved it. We went, it's shining light of the numbers. It's a bit of a revelation. It's that kind of thing. Like, we loved it. But it wasn't until after we bought out Jason that I was standing in my office one day, internally complaining about stuff that wasn't happening within the business. Clients aren't getting this, and work isn't doing that, and profit's not looking like this, and cash not looking like that. And I found myself saying, Jason, why aren't you doing the things like? And it's like, hold on a second, he's not here anymore. You can't blame someone who's no longer in this room. So who's left in the room? It's like, oh shit, that's me. So turn the finger around, point at your chest, and say, Andrew, what are you going to do about this? What are you doing in this space? And for me, it was like, well, who am I doing it for? Like, who is Illuminate? How can I know what I'm trying to achieve if I don't even know who I am? Or when I say for who I am, who we are as a business. And it was at that very moment that I remember going, oh, I need to figure out who we are and what we stand for, because today we have just been really good people who are really good at what we're doing, who kind of hit on the zero thing, which gave us a bit of quick growth, who had some networks that referred us a bunch of work, but we hadn't really defined what we stood for. And more importantly as well, our digital presence, whilst being called Illuminate, still was somewhat stereotypical. I believe we had like a tagline that was like strategy, clarity, prosperity. And I was like, yeah, what the hell does that mean? Who knows what that means? And so unpacking and spending that time, we went, well, we want people, because people would walk up the stairs into our office and all of a sudden be like, whoa, are we in the right place? Because they were expecting to rock up to a normal accounting firm that happened to be called Illuminate instead of our accounting firm, which was just a little bit different. And so we wanted to make sure that our digital and external imagery of the business actually reflected our internal imagery as well. And my logic behind that was, I don't want to get out of bed and put a mask on every day. I don't want to try to pretend to be something that people want me to be. I don't want to, wear a suit if I don't feel like wearing a suit. I don't want to do that kind of stuff. I want to be comfortable in my own skin. I want to be respected for who I am. And I want to be valued because of the skill set that I bring to the table. And I think that was a huge component of us in the Illuminate days when we started going through that shift in terms of identity and brand. And our why, the whole Simon Sinek start with, right, was it's all about being authentic. It's all about representing ourselves to the truest form so that we have great relationships, because the whole thing was built off having great relationships. And how can you do that if you're not going to be authentically you? You're effectively faking a relationship for the benefit of trying to make money. And that is not at all something that we do.
And I know you've spoken a lot about about being authentic and about people and culture. But what were the main things that at year 4, like what was the main things that you then set the scene on for the years to come after that?
Oh, I feel like I need to find my because we did a brand strategy guide. So one of the big things that we did, and I recommend this to anybody, is we went on a retreat with our team at the time. I think our team was maybe 4 people, 4 maybe 5 people we had within the business at the time. We were down at Phillip Island in Victoria. It was back when the Pokemon Go thing was going crazy, and we were like walking around trying to catch a Pokemon outside all the time. And so we just like loiter around like the beach because there was a cool Pokemon to catch. Yeah, that's how awesome we were. But what we did is we got someone to come in and guide us through strategy of how do we actually build that. How do they extract out of our brains stuff we think about? And I remember doing things like, blue ocean strategy. I remember, looking at avatars of the kind of people. And like I started becoming weirdly obsessive over the kind of music that our clients would listen to and the places that they would eat. And it was more just a matter of like, because that's where I would eat and that's the music I would like to listen to. And if I want to work with a client base that I enjoy working with, I want to relationally connect with them. And I need to be able to understand and understand who they are and where they come from. And if they're a classical loving vegan, which I have absolutely no issues with that, I would have less in common. It would be difficult for us to connect on a level where we wanted to kind of get deeper. And so, strategically then we started looking at those kind of elements of how do we bring that to life. We wanted to ensure that like when it came to like the visual element of the design, that there was illustration kind of vibe. That was like a free flowing kind of element around it, as opposed to a real boxed and restrictive kind of thing. As well as when it comes to like how you communicate who you are as a business and the values you stand. If you have to have a value that says something like ethical or honest, I mean, those are implied values. They should exist. So adamantly from day one, I'm like, nah, anything that like is something that you should be is a non-negotiable anyway. That's not a value. That's an implied thing. Our values need to really represent things that are beyond what that looks like. And yeah, it was fun as we kind of started pushing through that kind of stuff. It was, and we saw it quickly. I remember when we officially launched and changed our brand one day, overnight stuff just happened. And I mean, literally overnight. I had people hit me up on like LinkedIn going, hey, I just saw this brand. Like, who the hell are you guys? What are you doing? We had industry peers who looked at it and went, wow, what have you done here? And then we also had, people who were looking for work. All of a sudden, eyeballs were coming straight. This was literally the day after. I can remember like a lawyer hitting me up straight away and going, excellent, 2 things. 1, can you be my accountant? And 2, who did your branding work? And I'm like, dude, I haven't even met you. How do you even know if we're any good? And you can't undervalue a well thought out, authentically well represented brand. And for us at that time, I didn't realize what we were doing until, now 10 odd years later from there going, oh shit, we just didn't follow the rules and guidelines, but we also were respectful at the same time. And what we built out there was something quite unique.
Yeah, which is extremely interesting. So did you at that point in time niche down to specific types of clients, or were you generally deal with, what do you do with, I suppose, the type of client you deal with? Did that change at any point after that, or has it always been the same?
So for us, initially what we niched into wasn't necessarily a type of client when it comes to like an industry or like, but it was more a matter of this is the kind of people that we want to work with. These are the kind of like mentor. So it was more like what I'd say like a values-based niching. So we wanted to work with people who were entrepreneurially minded, people who were somewhat creative thinkers, people who had an element of rebellion, respectful rebellion in the way they did that. Like we referred to ourselves as rebels with a cause, and join the rebellion, these kind of things. And so we niched into that start. Now, that's a really hard thing to really focus into, and particularly if you're trying to make sure it's being done in a consistent way, because what I might assume to be the personality type that we might want to work with, if we then have another team member who is a different person, and it would be a bad idea to have, 20 different Andrews lying around. That'd be horrible. But if a different person was there and then they did that, and all of a sudden we might have been starting to target different type of people. So we did define those things, and we communicated a lot whenever we'd meet clients around things like our non-negotiables or those kind of things. Like our first rule was no dickheads. And we knew immediately, if I go, oh, hey, Nick, so like we've got these immutable laws. Number one, we've got a no dickheads policy. And if you immediately went, what do you mean no dickheads? And you can tell by the tone of voice. Internally, I'll be like, you're the one that's a dickhead. Like I can already see that that's what that is. And so you could pick up on those things over time, but you couldn't pick up on it day one because you had to get the experience of understanding like what are the areas and what are the type of people that maybe break your rules so that you can put things in place to protect that environment. Because if you're allowing your rules to continually be broken over and over again, you're showing your team members and your team that you don't value them as much. You're effectively showing the broader community that you're more concerned about maybe a top line revenue number or a bank account number than other things that you have said are more important. And you have no real guidance there. And what happens is things just fall apart. And particularly with team, they would look at that and go, well, you set some rules, you're not following them. I guess we don't have to follow them either, right? And it's really important to do so. But then over the years, we've now figured out that niche a bit more. Because right there, it was entrepreneurial, it was creative, it was rebellious, and it was 10 years either side of our age. And the 10 years either side of our age meant that we were going through life at a similar point in time. So we could talk about things like, starting a family. We could talk about things like parents, retiring, that kind of stuff. And that was really important for us to be relevant and connected with our clients.
And are you niche now? Like, are you more specific now with the types of clients that you work with?
Yeah. So this then comes with over time as well. And I think because I was so young when I started Illuminate, I didn't, and I came from a Big Four experience to then a suburban, like I'd had a diverse kind of 4 years of working. Like I'd only been an accountant qualified for 4 years. So I didn't truly understand niche when it comes to industry and those kind of things. I understood service delivery and client experience, but I didn't understand that. And so over the years, having been exposed to thus then multiple different types of industries, you start to realize where the kind of people you enjoy. So where is it more likely to find these personality types, as well as the type of work where you believe you can add more value. So what in what I do, how does this help people? Do people value that? Or do they look at that and go, it's just a necessary evil? And so now we have niche down into some key industries that sit there as well. So we look after e-commerce brands, we look after alcohol brands, we look after trades, construction, professional services, hospitality, and agencies, so creative agencies. And those are the 6 we do with then self-managed super specialists internally. And what that means is we're now empowered to say no because we have said yes to something. Once you have your one thing, the thing that you've committed to, the thing you're passionate about, it makes it way easier when someone says, oh, hey, I'm inquiring about potentially getting you to look after our stuff. And you go, well, you're in the medical space. So whilst we probably could service you, whilst it probably could be profitable, it's not connected with the growth, with the environment we're trying to create. So once again, I'm going to break rules, which means I'm showing my teams that the rules we set aren't appropriate. And I'm also going to potentially put us under undue stress and pressure, having to learn certain nuances. And I also can't build out a streamlined service arrangement where we go, great, we pick up e-commerce client. We're going to look at gross profit, marketing return, shipping cost, all of these kind of numbers and these things that we can start rolling out with consistency and speak with actual true knowledge, as opposed to speak with accountant knowledge. And the accountant knowledge that I do in inverted commas here is profit, tax, and those kind of things, which is relatable across every single business. And I guess I never really saw us as like a compliance-based business, more of like I don't even reflect, we're an accounting firm, but I refer to it as like we're an advisory-led business, or like a business accounting practice. Like it's the compliance word we eventually shove in. And when we talk to people about what we do, it's like, oh yeah, no, we also do tax returns. We do them too. But it's the other stuff which really became, I guess, element of that niche, that the industry stuff, but then the service niche that came in there too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the niching part's critical parts of being able to scale and grow. So what are the
And
next?
to add to
So,
that, like
mm,
even in the last 2 years now, particularly looking at one of the niches or two of the niches that we've focused on, it has become far easier to find good work. Far easier to, because we've developed, networks within there. We've developed trust. We've got continual referrals coming through from that because we've just paid attention to that and those couple of things as opposed to everything else. And that, it's been far easier to find the right stuff rather than kind of finding shit work and having to drop it eventually.
yeah, and that's what I say. Who do you want to be a hero to? And it's, whether it's a couple of niches or just one. So what did the next couple of years of growth look like from year 4, the next couple of years of once you made those pretty significant changes? What were the next, 3-4 years looking like?
Yeah, okay. So we hit the $1 million mark in 2018 was the year we turned into a mill. Not that like the $1 million mark is really anything to target, in my opinion. I think it's around what you're trying to achieve as a business objective, and the dollars and numbers fall behind that. So so that was the $1 million mark we hit then 2 years after buying out Business Partner. So I believe at the time when I bought him out, we had about $500,000 worth of revenue. And so then 2 years later, we'd kind of doubled that revenue that was sitting there. And then we continue to grow relatively healthily. But what we also did is we then split out our accounting and bookkeeping businesses into separate legal entities, which was a really good thing for us in terms of ensuring that we were building a sustainable business here too. A lot of people talk about bookkeeping services being a loss leader and that kind of stuff, whereas I'm like, nah, I don't stand for that. Like, we need to ensure that our business activity is profitable at all times. So our service delivery should be utmost. And, the bookkeeping stuff can stand on its own 2 legs. And so we split that out in 2020. So that was probably, actually, that was before 2020. It would have been 2019, 1st July 2019. And that was 3 years after the buyout at that point in time. And then our first year of bookkeeping rev, we got to 350 grand in year 1 there, because it was just demand came in and away we went.
I want to jump forward a little bit now because I think this story's, I want to talk about the office that you built because it's very custom and different. And I think there's some real lessons and stories in that. But at the moment, you don't work full-time in the business, do you?
No. So
tell us that story. And because I think this is one of the great aspirations of a lot of people is to build a firm that they don't have to be in all the time. And you've been able to do that in a roundabout way. So do you want to give us that story?
Sure. So, I mean, if I even go back to day 1 of Illuminate, I remember Jason and I went to go have a hit of golf balls, follow around some white balls, probably lose more than we could find, that kind of thing. And I enjoyed playing golf and I still love it now. And I remember Jason and I talking about the whole idea of like, cool, we'd like to get to a point where it's, 4 days a week worth of work. We play golf 1 day a week, maybe, once a month, that kind of thing. But there was always this intention of there's a point in time where us as the business owners will be not required as much. And we need to be building a business that enables that for us to do. And so over the years to come, when Jason was there and when he wasn't there, that was always in the back of my mind is I need to make myself redundant. Otherwise, I just have a really well-paying job that's connected to an asset. And I'm always required here. And particularly, I think in our industry, as a partner of an accounting firm or whatever kind of thing you want to refer to your role as the person effectively who will go to jail if it all goes to shit. Like, that's great. But like, how are you looking at that future? You have to make yourself redundant. You have to get to a point where you're not required. So strategically, you're constantly doing that. So I had a countdown timer on my phone that had a date on it. I remember showing you that potentially. It was 30 June 2020, 30 June 2021. And if you reflect back to 30 June 2021 and being a Melburnian, we were stuck inside for a bit long and I got my hands a lot more dirty within that business at that point in time. So I just tacked, an extra 5 years onto it, which I was comfortable to do given the situation. But fast forward to now where we're at, like the goal has always been make yourself redundant. It's always been bring in people who are potentially better and more capable of certain stuff from you. And I've always referred to as like, I'm going to fade out one day. This business isn't mine. I'm just the caretaker of it. I need to have broad shoulders and I need to learn to let it go. Those are things easier said than done. And the reality does change. But 2 years ago, almost to the day now, 2 years ago, we had our third child, our son, Jericho. Now, he wasn't a planned baby. And there's probably so many podcasts I've said that on now that I really hope he doesn't listen back and feel like
he will.
He was also the best thing that happened to us at that point in our lives. I'd been away on a month-long speaking tour in the UK, weirdly speaking in like pubs and whiskey bars and all kinds of crazy stuff. And then came home and then a couple of months later, we find out we're pregnant. The day before our 5-year leadership retreat, where our leaders were taking a couple of days to, vision and think about the next 5 years for Illuminate, but also, and if not more importantly, the vision in 5 years for themselves as individually. It was also, we found out we're pregnant a week before we were going on a holiday to Fiji with the kids. And so I remember in that leadership retreat, the first thing we did was share us your 5-year plan. What do you want to do in your life? And I was always going to share. I was going to share last. And I remember speaking to Shaithaya, who I'm not sure if she's jumping on this, whatever, but she helped to facilitate that session for us. I remember talking to her the day before, called her up and said, hey, we're pregnant, which is amazing. But how do I talk about this tomorrow? Because all of a sudden, I don't know what the next 5 years looks like. I don't know what it means for the business. I don't know what it means for me. And so what I meant, I'm going to get emotional because I always hate this. I had to lie to my team for like the first time ever. And I'm standing there and I'm like, what's the next 5 years look like? And it's like, oh, it'll be this and it'll be that. And internally, I'm like just ripped apart because I'm like, I don't know. And as someone who whilst I'm not a planner, once I set my mind on something, this is what we're here to achieve. And this, the facility and everything we built in the factory, all this kind of stuff, which we did afterwards, actually, I didn't know what the next 5 years looked like. And so I had to lie about it. And we went away. We went to Fiji for the week, which was okay. My wife would have loved to have a drink or two. My eldest child got motion sickness and was unwell for about 4 straight days. And then we got back and we thought, and we talked more about this. And I think it was differently at a time in my life where I was becoming more and more cognizant of the roles and responsibilities that sit within a family environment. Some of the stereotypical roles that might exist because that's the way it's always been done. Or some of the roles that might exist simply because people just don't maybe communicate in their relationships around what is important for each other. And what I unpacked is that if we're going to have a newborn child and a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old in our house, that is a lot of responsibility for my wife Ivana to kind of have. And while she's a phenomenal parent, an amazing wife and those kind of things, she's not a superhero. And our kids deserve to have the attention of their parents as much as possible, as well as, I guess, to some extent, the gift of a parent is being around your kids as they're growing. And so I made the call to take 4 months off work to effectively, I'm taking long service. I've been here for that long. And I'm going to try and experience what it's like to raise a newborn every day. Not just I'll get up in the morning and then I'll go to work and I'll come home and look after it, but can you do the night feeds? Because I need to be focused for tomorrow because my job is demanding and that kind of stuff. And so I made the call to do that. And then probably a couple of weeks after making that call, I hadn't communicated this with the team yet. I was then unpacking that more, and I said, I think when I come back, I don't think I'm the person that this business needs to go to where it needs to go. Or more importantly, I don't think I have what this business needs and what my family needs at the same time. It's unfair to be able to do that. This business needs someone that's focused, and this family needs someone that's focused, and I just don't think I can do that. And so I went, okay, cool. Well, how do I resolve that? And for me, it was very much, I've built a leadership team around this business that I believe are exceptionally talented in what they do. None of us have ever played the roles that we were in and are in right now. We're all learning and failing and succeeding all at the same time. But when I return, I'm going to do 2, maybe 3 days a week. And this leadership team around are going to take on some more responsibility. Now, at this time, we already had 4 other people that were in equity at Illuminate. So they'd bought in a few years prior to that. And so I remember sharing that's what it's look like, and I'm going to start to delegate out a bunch of my responsibilities. And I think as a founder in a business that grows, and then you have other senior people, whether they're in equity or leadership, you can always feel like you're underappreciated, undervalued, and that people, whether this is true or not, I don't know if it's true, but I'm always someone that maybe has a bit of that doubt in my mind in terms of how people value me for what I do, because I don't do accounting things. And so I was a little bit nervous in terms of the roles and responsibilities that I would hand out, and whether people would think that, like, here, Andrew doesn't really do anything, so who cares? It's whatever it is. But what was kind of nice is, as I handed that over and took those 4 months off and came back, there was definitely a recognition of, holy shit, there's a lot that actually happens that we don't know. And an understanding of the importance of people to have those responsibilities. But then when I returned back to that limited capacity, what I also did, and haven't said this yet here, is probably 3 months before I took time off work, I decided to buy my parents out of their retail bathroom renovation store. And so now, as of now, it's about 20 months into running a business that has bricks and mortar. We sell taps, toilets, showers, and all those kind of things. And the reason for that was I want to be connected and supporting of my family environment. I went, Mum and Dad need to retire. They've got a business that on a P&L looks pretty good-ish, but when you walk into the store, it doesn't look great. And so people aren't going to want to buy that. So I'll take that over, I'll restore that, and I'll bring some more value into there. And so all of a sudden, I'm now 2, maybe 3 days a week worth of work at Illuminate, and then 1 to 27 days a week at this bathroom store, depending on what it needed for me. That was, even to this day, it's still very challenging. When people say, what is it that you do, Andrew, who've never met me before, I struggle to explain in a way that makes sense, because I'm like, well, I've got a background in tax and accounting. I'm a fellow chartered accountant. I'm a tax agent. I've built an accounting business with a team of about 25, and we service and support people in these industries doing these things. And about 5 years ago, or a couple of years ago, this thing happened with my son and I now run a retail bathroom renovation store. But also 5 years ago, we bought a factory because Illuminate needed a home, and everything was really expensive. So we thought, well, why don't we just buy a much more expensive, bigger one, and we turn it into a co-working space with an accounting firm that lives upstairs. And I also run a couple of podcasts, and I got 3 wives and a kid who's 3 wives, sorry, 3 kids and a wife who still loves me some. And when I see the look on their face, when they look at me, they're like, whoa, what the hell, man? Like, how do you do that? I'm like, you have to have good people around you to be able to do this stuff. And I was lucky enough at Illuminate that I think we built a leadership team $2 million too early, or at least $1 million too early when it comes to rev. We had 5 people, myself included, on a leadership team when we were turning over like 1.6, 1.7 mil, not even turning over 2. So you don't need that. But my goal was always to be made redundant. So how can I put myself in a position where I'm not needed if I don't release those responsibilities to these people? And how can we get a diversity of thought if it's all just Andrew doing that? And so, so my life's manic now, but it's allowed me to step back and do things differently. And it was years of work to get there, years of saying the same phrases over and over again, whether it was like to in interviews with prospective team members, whether it was to clients, whether it was on stage speaking at conferences, the consistency of that phrasing and the consistency of this is what we're building and where we're going. It meant that when we hit those things, you could reflect back and celebrate. and go, shit, that's actually what we planned, and we somehow we pulled it off.
And the growth without you in it, like, is the firm still growing at the rate that you are happy with, with the involvement that you've got in it, or has it slowed down somewhat, or is the vision just as strong and just as passionate without Andrew being there all the time?
So my role within the business now is what I refer to as growth and good vibes. So effectively, what I've done is I've removed myself, and I was doing this for probably a year or two before it, but I've removed myself from the day-to-day side of things. Delivering work for clients, reviewing stuff, that kind of stuff. I've removed myself from that. We've got a great team who are capable of doing that. They don't need me to be involved. I released all of my clients to, our team. We've often had a very flat approach where even junior accountants have direct client relationship management, which we're tweaking and adjusting. I think as you scale, we have to adjust that slightly. And so what it has meant is that my role is now focused on growth. But what is growth, and how do you define growth? And, is it a top line revenue number? Is it a bottom line profit number? Is it something in between? And I know that at Illuminate, and I know that at other businesses as well, is when you're growing anything with intention, typically you're having to invest a lot more resources in order to get to that point. And so there definitely were times where we were growing where our profitability was significantly less at like a percentage basis than it could have or should have been. But it was because we had to do those things to enable us to make sure that our people didn't get too stressed out. And so when I took those 4 months off, I think we did learn as a business, there are definitely things that Andrew does or is involved in that we didn't quite comprehend the gravity of, or the importance of. And I always talk about it with my team, is my job is to ensure that like we're filtering the funnel to the point where the right clients are coming in, but their job is to ensure that the buckets at the bottom has no holes in it, so we aren't losing people at the back end. Or what I'd like to refer is I'm the front door and they're the couch. I'm the meter, I'm the greeter. Hey, how you doing? High fives, it's all great, fantastic. Go and hang out with those guys, and you'll be sitting on the couch, party, drinking beers, having a good old time. That's where you need to be. And so their job is to make sure it's a comfy couch, good conversations, and that the food and drink is flowing in a respectful and appropriate way. And I think we learnt that in that 4 months of me not being there were things that I paid attention to that even I couldn't explain what that was. I couldn't even tell, I'm looking at this, and I wasn't looking at that, but it was different. And so we took a dip. We had a hit. I think for the first time ever, we went backwards in a year. I think we'd grown by 20% the year before, and then we went backwards only by a tiny amount. It was like, maybe like 1%, 2%, or something like that. We had a little backwards bit. But it was interesting to reflect on like, oh, why was that? What changed at that point in time? But also, are we okay with that? Is that an acceptable kind of thing? Do we have to keep growing? Do we have to go there? And if our mission at Illuminate is we want small businesses to stand the test of time. And so if our goal is to help businesses to stand the test of time, but if we're constantly growing and picking up all these new clients, can we service them in a way where they can or not? Or are we simply trying to have more businesses that we can support? And so we're definitely thinking about it differently in terms of what that looks like. Is like growth might actually be in growth in client sustainability. And that's the growth we want to focus on. So our service delivery needs to be connected to that. Now, we know that if we do that well and clients stay with us, we'll churn less clients, and more than likely we'll get more referrals when we get there. And so we definitely have seen, as we've refocused into that, picking that up now. I think this year, the business will probably be on track to hit a 3 mil, give or take, maybe touch under, maybe top over, depending on what the next few months kind of end up at. And if I look at that and I go back to like a few years ago, that's probably about a 50% growth in the last 3 years, 3.5, 4 years, give or take. But like I said, it's a top line growth. Throw out the bullshit phrase. What is it? Revenue is that kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool. Like for me, I just want to feel like we're growing, and I want to feel like we're improving, and we're better at what we do. And that's what I would be rather obsessed over when it comes to growth, is like individual and business service growth. Are we servicing and performing better for our clients?
Do you look at it differently now that you're not in it, though? Do you look at it more as an investor and shareholder in the business as opposed to when you were working full-time in it? Is there any different aspect of how you look at the business now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to describe exactly why that is, because I think some of that is connected to the broader ownership environment and everyone's individual's perspectives and desires for the business. Whether they're looking to get like a cash return on an annual basis, distributions, where they're looking for an increase in value on the business, where they're looking for an improvement in percentage profitability, so we're more efficient with what we do. And so absolutely, I look at that. The hard part, having done practically everything within a business and then being more disconnected from the day-to-day operational. So how we deliver services to clients, I am significantly removed from now. I'll more than happily get involved and help and whatnot, but I know that more often than I get in the way than I actually help, more often than not. And so you absolutely, your perspective changes, because you look at things and you start going, well, I know what we should be doing. And you start just running formulas and ratios and numbers, and you start getting grumpy and angry when things don't hit that way. And you're not. And what I find is, when I have too much of an investor mentality in some things, the way I communicate and expectations change in a way that doesn't necessarily empower and encourage our people to do good. And sometimes it means you're looking and reflecting on things that are negative far too much than you are on the opportunities there. And so definitely has changed. And it's something that I have to keep doing. I mean, I got it tattooed on my arm now. It says, let it go. You got to learn, I think, when you move into that investment kind of stage of like, this isn't I'm getting a payback period today. This is still a medium to long-term business. This thing's going to be around hopefully for the next forever. And we can't be making silly investment decisions today that might hurt us in 5 years' time, simply because it gets us a better return now.
Andrew, it's such a cool story, and I think it's a very different approach to how a lot of people take it, and how authentic you are is one of the reasons why, I really got, I suppose, pulled towards you years ago when I first met you. And yeah, thank you for being on the show today, for sharing like you have. I've learned a lot more about you today than I thought I knew you pretty well, but mate, you
I feel
are.
like we might have to do another 3 or 4 of these to unpack all the other stuff that we didn't get to, mate. It's a pleasure, mate. It's so good just to be able to. I mean, I love chatting and with you on the best of times, but it's always nice to kind of unpack and reflect on some of these things of where you've been and where you go to. Like 10 years ago, I remember sitting down with a team member of mine who left to support her husband's business, and actually, coincidentally, she's now back working with us. And I remember sitting down going, 150 grand is all I really need in terms of income and revenue. Like, I don't need any more than that to kind of live and survive. And now I've got 3 kids and a mortgage, and you realize that doesn't really go all that far. But like, the goal is never money. The goal is never a profit number at the end. And my belief is, if that is what you're trying to achieve, eventually you might achieve it, but the way you get there might not be the way that you're happy in getting there. Just because it's sexy doesn't mean it's sustainable. And building a business that's sustainable is far more important than something that gets a quick win today.
Yeah, and I love that your journey wasn't a straight line. There's ups, there's downs, there's back and forward, and well done on all you've done, and thank you for being on the show. I know that all of our listeners are going to get massive value. So thanks again for your time today.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it, bud.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on socials so you don't miss the next episode.